I'm going to be covering one of aviation's most horrific catastrophes in the world, where it involved the collision of two massive 747 passenger jets in the middle of the runway, with 235 souls in one plane and 380 souls in the other, which both of these planes came face to face in high speeds, leaving only 61 survivors. This tragic accident is also known as Tenerife 1977. My name is Aahil Faliq, and in this video I'll be taking you down specifically what caused the accident, how it could have been prevented, and how it was addressed that changed aviation safety. We first need to understand the types of airplanes that were involved in this incident. The first one is a KLM 747-200B, flight 4085 coming from Amsterdam Schiphol Airport in the Netherlands. The other aircraft is a Pan Am 747-100, flight 1736 coming from Los Angeles, with a stopover at New York's JFK Airport in the United States. On March 27, 1977, both airplanes were heading to a tropical destination called Gran Canaria, specifically Las Palmas Airport, located off the coast of northwestern Africa, though these plans were diverted. As both planes were approaching to the airport, there was a terrorist attack at Las Palmas Airport, forcing Las Palmas Airport to shut down till further notice. Because of this, all inbound aircraft had to divert to a different airport called Los Rodeos Airport, including Pan Am Flight 1736 and KLM Flight 4085. This is the map of Los Rodeos Airport, modernly called Tenerife North Airport, located in Tenerife, which is the biggest island in the Canary Islands. Please have a look at it, as understanding the airport layout will be crucial in explaining the cause of this incident. There were only two air traffic controllers at Los Rodeos Airport at that time. This is because Los Rodeos only has one runway and meant to only carry light airplanes, unlike the 747 where at the time it was the biggest passenger plane of all time. The airport was quickly starting to fill up, forcing further arriving airplanes to park in the main taxiway, which includes the KLM Flight 4085 and Pan Am Flight 1736. The KLM pilots include Captain Jacob van Zanten, First Officer Klaas Mers, and Flight Engineer Willem Schroeder. The Pan Am pilots include Captain Victor Grubbs, First Officer Robert Braggs, and Flight Engineer George Warnes. After 2.5 hours, Las Palmas Airport eventually reopened, so all airplanes were preparing for departure in Los Rodeos. During this time, the captain of the KLM 747 was refueling the plane and had passengers waiting in the main terminal. On the other hand, the Pan Am 747 had all passengers in the plane and was ready to depart. But they couldn't move from their position because KLM 4085 was blocking the path to the runway, meaning they had no choice and had to wait till KLM was done refueling. Once finished, KLM Flight 4085 was the first to depart and was instructed by air traffic control to taxi down runway 12 and make a 180-degree turn to line up on runway 30. This procedure is known as backtracking, and it is common in airports without a taxiway to the runway. Note that the weather at the time was unwanted, with thick fog clouds covering the place, making visibility uneasy for air traffic control and pilots. The plan was for the Pan Am 747 to follow the KLM 747 on the runway, and exit the runway via Charlie 3, and use the parallel taxiway to taxi onto the runway. Unfortunately, this plan did not match the reality. When Pan Am 1736 entered the runway, the visibility shrunk from 500 meters to 100 meters. As they taxied down the runway, they were unsure if air traffic control said exit using Charlie 1 or Charlie 3, as they were struggling to identify the exits through this thick fog. At this stage, neither of the 747s was able to see each other, and the air traffic controllers had no idea what was about to unfold. Los Rodeos Airport was not equipped with ground radars and therefore relied on pilot reports through the low visibility. As KLM 4085 lined up on the runway, the captain did not hesitate to push power for takeoff. The first officer noticed this and reminded the captain that clearance was not issued. They stopped the aircraft and asked for clearance. The air traffic control gave flight instructions once they were airborne, but never actually gave explicit clearance for takeoff. The first officer replied with a clearance and stated, "We are now at takeoff," which the captain, without hesitation, said, "Let's go." Air traffic control replied with, "Okay, stand by for takeoff, I will call you." But due to interference, this radio communication became inaudible to KLM. Upon hearing the conversation, Pan Am 1736 tries to alert everyone about their presence on the runway by transmitting, "We are still taxiing on the runway." To make matters worse, this radio communication was also blocked due to interference. As KLM was gaining power, air traffic control asked Pan Am 1736 to call when they have cleared the runway. The flight engineer on KLM hears this and notifies the captain, but Captain Jacob Van Zanten disregards the concern and continues with the takeoff. Pan Am identifies the KLM accelerating towards them, and they apply maximum power in an attempt to get off the runway as fast as possible, while KLM tries to go airborne as fast as possible, causing a tail strike, but it was too late. There were 248 people on board the KLM 747, which no one survived. And there were 396 people on board the Pan Am 747, which only 61 survived. This accident was considered the most fatal crash in aviation history, and it was straightaway taken into investigation by the USA, Spain, and the Netherlands. Los Rodeos Airport was catering for a huge number of airplanes, which having to park these airplanes on the taxiway was no standard day in Los Rodeos, disrupting normal procedures and adding extra pressure on the two air traffic controllers. Another thing is that there was also poor communication between air traffic control and KLM pilots. There was a non-standard phraseology used between the two parties. Phrases such as "we are now at takeoff" were easily misinterpreted. Radio interference also made matters worse, as information like Pan Am warning everyone that they were on the runway was never received by the KLM pilots. A significant part in the cause of the crash was the bad weather, which the fog was very thick, also played by a huge role in Pan Am being unable to identify the exits. If they had identified the exits earlier, the incident may have never occurred. Pan Am 1736 taxiing out of Charlie 3 was very optimistic, because the turn was nearly impossible as a 140-degree turn would have had to been made. It was concluded that the main factor of the collision was Captain Zanten's decision to take off without clearance, while also disregarding the flight engineer's concern that Pan Am 1736 was still taxiing down the runway. This accident changed aviation forever, and its effects can still be seen today. The word takeoff can no longer be used to communicate on the radio, unless a takeoff clearance is explicitly being given. If pilots are ready for takeoff, they must transmit that they are ready for departure. Within the cockpit, the incident showed how lack of teamwork between crew members can have a catastrophic effect. As a result, a greater emphasis was put on teamwork, decision-making, and communication skills for training and multi-crew environments. This eventually led to the foundation of CRM, Crew Resource Management. 4 years after the crash, 1981, United Airlines became the first airline to apply CRM in their training. In the following years, dozens of airlines began following the footsteps of United Airlines, which also applying CRM was used in their airline. By the 90s, it became a global standard and has since played a critical role in aviation safety. My name is Aahil Faliq, and thank you for listening to my explanation of the Tenerife 1977 incident.